The cold arrived before the wind. It seeped through the wooden walls like a living thing, testing every crack, every seam of the old cabin, standing alone in the endless white of the Saka steppe. The thermometer nailed beside the door had frozen at minus 79 degrees Celsius, its red line buried at the bottom. Inside, 80-year-old Anisa Petrovna sat near the iron stove, feeding it splinters of larch wood. Her hands, swollen and stiff with age, moved with deliberate precision. Every motion mattered in weather like this. Across from her, her daughter Lena tightened the fur lining of her parka. "They're restless," Lena said quietly. Anisa didn't look up. "They feel it." Outside, their flock of sheep pressed together inside the timber enclosure, their breath rising in clouds. The wind had not yet begun to howl, but the sky had turned metallic, a dull, suffocating gray that promised violence. Anisa finally stood. "We checked the fences. Now, before the storm decides for us." Lena hesitated only a second. When the temperature drops this low, hesitation can kill. They stepped outside. The cold struck like glass shattering against skin. The snow squeaked under their boots, a sound so sharp it seemed to crack the silence. Frost clung to Lena's eyelashes almost instantly. Anisa moved slower, but not weaker. She scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes, trained by decades of survival. Then she stopped. "There," she said. Lena followed her gaze. Dark shapes interrupted the endless white, faint depressions in the snow beyond the outer fence. Tracks. Fresh. The wind hadn't erased them yet. Wolves. Lena felt her stomach tighten. In this cold, hunger makes predators bold. A blizzard would cover their approach, silence their movement. Anisa crouched with difficulty, brushing snow aside with a mittened hand. The paw print was large. "More than one," she murmured. "They're waiting." A distant howl cut through the air, thin, carried far in the brittle cold. The sheep shifted nervously behind the wooden barrier. The wind began to rise. The first blast of wind hit like a physical shove. Snow lifted from the ground in sheets, swirling violently around them. Within minutes, visibility shrank to a few dozen feet. Lena hurried along the fence line, hammer in hand, securing loose planks with numb fingers. Nails felt like ice shards between her gloves. Anisa dragged an extra stack of firewood toward the sheep enclosure. "We build a second barrier," she shouted over the wind. "At minus 79, Lena yelled back. "At minus 79. They worked without arguing. Rope froze stiff in their hands. Breath burned in their lungs. The sheep huddled tighter, their bodies pressed against the inner walls. The old wooden posts groaned as wind battered them. Another howl, closer this time. The storm was now fully awake. And somewhere beyond the swirling white, shadows were circling. Darkness came early, not because of sunset, but because the blizzard swallowed the sky. Snow pounded sideways, erasing tracks, landmarks, and distance. The world became a white tunnel of movement and sound. Lena stumbled against the fence. "I can't see past 10 feet. "You don't need to," Anisa replied sharply. "You just need to hear." They paused. Through the roar of wind, there was a low, rhythmic padding beneath the storm. Moving, circling, testing. Anisa handed Lena the old hunting rifle kept by the enclosure. The metal felt like frozen stone. "Only if they breach," Anisa said. "We scare first." Another impact against the outer fence. Wood splintered. The sheep erupted in panicked bleating. The wolves had begun. The outer fence cracked with a violent snap. Through the swirling snow, Lena saw them, gray shapes low to the ground, eyes reflecting pale light. One wolf lunged, jaws snapping against timber. Anisa didn't hesitate. She grabbed a metal shovel and slammed it against the wood, shouting with a voice far stronger than her body suggested. "Hey!" Lena fired a warning shot into the air. The sound exploded across the frozen plain, briefly overpowering the storm. The wolves recoiled but did not flee. They were desperate. Another wolf darted toward a weakened corner of the enclosure. Anisa moved faster than Lena thought possible, jamming the shovel into the gap, bracing it with her body. Snow cut across her face like knives. "We hold," she shouted. We hold until they give up. The wind howled. The wolves regrouped in the swirling white, and the temperature continued to fall. The wolves adapted. They stopped charging blindly and began to move with precision, vanishing into curtains of snow only to reappear from another angle. Their shadows flickered through the storm like shifting ghosts. Lena kept the rifle raised, her arms trembling from cold and adrenaline. "They're coordinating," she said. Anissa nodded, gripping the shovel with both hands. "They always do." A wolf darted in from the left, snapping at a weakened plank. Another lunged from the opposite side at the same time. The fence groaned under the pressure. A single board cracked. A narrow opening appeared. One wolf shoved its head through. Lena fired again, not into the air this time, but into the snow directly in front of the animal. The impact exploded ice and powder into its face. The wolf recoiled, snarling. But they did not retreat far. They were waiting for exhaustion. And exhaustion, in this cold, comes quickly. "We need light," Anissa said. Lena stared at her. In this wind, smoke and flame frightened more than bullets. They retreated briefly toward the woodpile. Lena shielded her hands with her body as Anissa poured a small amount of fuel on a bundle of branches. The match nearly blew out. The second one caught. Flame burst to life, small and defiant. Together, they dragged the burning bundle toward the breach. The wind bent the flames sideways, but the brightness cut through the white chaos. Anissa lifted the torch high and shouted again, a raw, ancient sound that seemed pulled from generations of survival. The wolves hesitated. One backed away. Another growled but stepped sideways, circling instead of charging. The fire was working, but it would not last long in this storm. Hours felt like days. The blizzard intensified, burying their boots with every minute that passed. Snow climbed halfway up the fence posts. Lena's fingers had begun to lose sensation. "Go inside for 5 minutes," Anissa ordered. "No, that is not bravery. That is foolishness." Lena hesitated, then ran to the cabin and back, warming her hands briefly over the stove before returning with more fuel-soaked rags and 2 metal lanterns. Anissa's breath came heavier now. Ice clung to her scarf. Her eyelashes had frozen together at the corners. Another violent slam shook the fence. A wolf had found a lower section, where snowdrifts now formed a ramp. It leapt. This time, it cleared the outer barrier. It landed between the fences. The sheep screamed in panic. Lena raised the rifle. Anissa stepped forward first. The wolf stood 10 feet away, gray fur thick against the cold, ribs faintly visible beneath its coat. Yellow eyes locked onto the nearest sheep. It was thin, desperate, alive. Anissa lifted the burning torch and advanced slowly. "Not tonight," she whispered. The wolf bared its teeth but did not attack her. It assessed. Lena fired a shot into the snow at its flank. The crack echoed through the storm. The wolf flinched, then sprang backward, scrambling over the snow ramp and disappearing into the blizzard. For a moment, there was silence except for wind. Then another howl. Farther away, the pack was retreating. They did not relax. Predators sometimes retreat only to regroup. But as the next hour passed, the howls grew distant. The movement beyond the storm faded. The blizzard, however, showed no mercy. Snow continued to pile against the fences. The real threat now shifted: collapse, suffocation, freezing. "We dig," Lena said. Anissa nodded. Side by side, mother and daughter began clearing snow from the base of the enclosure to prevent pressure from breaking the posts. Every scoop felt heavier than the last. The sheep slowly calmed. By what felt like dawn, though the sky remained a swirling gray, the wind began to weaken. Not stop, but weaken. The wolves were gone. The storm was not. Anissa leaned on her shovel, breath fogging in slow, tired clouds. "We saved them," Lena said quietly. "For tonight," Anissa replied. Morning did not arrive with sunlight. It arrived with silence. The wind had finally died, leaving behind a frozen stillness so complete it rang in the ears. Snowdrifts swallowed half the fence. The world looked reshaped, unfamiliar. Lena pushed open the cabin door slowly. Snow resisted like packed cement. Anissa stepped out beside her. The temperature had not risen. Breath crystallized midair. They scanned the horizon. No movement, no tracks visible. The storm had erased everything. But that did not mean safety. Count them, Anissa said. They waded through thigh-deep snow toward the enclosure. The sheep huddled together, frost clinging to their wool. Lena counted twice. All here. Anissa closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, but in acknowledgement. Survival was never celebration. It was continuation. The storm had created new dangers. Snow pressed heavily against the outer fence, bending posts at unnatural angles. One full section had collapsed inward under the weight. If they return tonight, Lena began. They will, Anissa answered calmly. Hunger doesn't disappear with wind. They began digging immediately. Each shovel of snow felt like lifting stone. Their movements were slower now, fatigue creeping into muscles already strained beyond reason. Anissa stopped suddenly. There, half buried near the outer edge, a shape frozen into the drift. A wolf, dead. It must have been injured during the confrontation and failed to escape the storm. Lena stared at it. They risked everything. So did we, Anissa said. There was no triumph in her voice. Only truth. The sky remained overcast, but visibility improved enough for proper repairs. Lena retrieved spare boards from behind the cabin. The wood was brittle in the cold. Nails bent easily if struck wrong. Anissa directed from inside the enclosure, reinforcing inner posts. You measure twice, she called out. You waste nothing out here. The work was methodical, intentional. They built a lower snow wall packed tight along the fence base, a barrier against both wind and future predators. By midday, their gloves were stiff with frost. Their shoulders ached. Lena paused. You should rest. Anissa gave her a sharp look. When the sheep rest safely for 3 nights in a row, I rest. Lena almost smiled. Almost. Late afternoon brought something unsettling. Ravens. Black shapes circled overhead, drawn to the scent of the fallen wolf half buried in snow. Their cries cut through the stillness. And then, a distant howl. Faint, but real. Lena froze. They're back. Anissa listened carefully. Not close. Not yet. But the sound confirmed what both already knew. The pack had not given up the territory. Predators test. They wait. They study weakness. The blizzard had been one battle. Winter itself was the war. Anissa turned toward the cabin. Tonight, we keep the fire burning outside. Lena nodded. No more waiting behind walls. As darkness crept over the steppe once more, they prepared differently. Instead of hiding inside, they built controlled fire pits around the outer perimeter, shielded by packed snow blocks to resist wind. Flames flickered against the endless white, casting long golden halos across the frozen ground. The sheep settled earlier this time, less frantic. Anissa stood near the largest fire, wrapped in thick fur, face illuminated by the glow. Lena watched the horizon with the rifle resting against her shoulder. Hours passed. No attack came. Only distant howls carried faintly across miles of snow. The message was clear. The wolves were still there, but so were they, and neither side intended to surrender. Anissa looked at her daughter. We endure, she said quietly. Lena nodded. We endure. The fires burned through the night. The 4th night felt longer than the storm itself. The fires crackled and snapped, sending sparks into the frozen dark. Snow reflected the flames, turning the field into a wavering sea of gold and shadow. Lena had not slept more than an hour at a time in days. You should lie down, Anissa said, not taking her eyes off the horizon. If they come while I'm asleep, they won't come because you are awake. They come because they are hungry. Still, Lena remained standing. Somewhere beyond the outer glow of firelight, something moved. Not charging, watching. The wolves had changed tactics. No more reckless lunges. No more desperate leaps. They were conserving strength. So were the women. By morning, another problem emerged. The sheep's feed was running low. The blizzard had delayed their last supply run to the village. The snowdrifts now made travel nearly impossible. Lena calculated silently. For days, she said. Maybe 5 if we ration. Anissa nodded slowly. We reduce portions. Keep them calm. And us. Anissa allowed herself the smallest smile. We've survived worse. But the truth lingered between them. Winter did not only test fences. It tested reserves. Human and animal alike. Late afternoon brought tension. One of the younger sheep had grown weak, separated slightly from the flock. It struggled to stand, its breath shallow in the brutal cold. Lena knelt beside it. If they sense this, they will. Anissa finished. Predators detect weakness with frightening precision. As if summoned by instinct, a howl rose again, closer than before. The wolves had noticed. Anissa moved decisively. They relocated the weaker sheep into a small inner stall within the cabin storage extension, sacrificing part of their own with supply space. Warmth from the stove barely reached the animal, but it was enough. We protect the weakest, Anissa said firmly. That is how flocks survive. Lena looked at her mother. And families. That night, the wolves returned with renewed boldness. 3 shapes emerged at the edge of firelight. Then 5. Their breath rose in ghostly plumes. They did not rush. They paced, testing reaction. Lena lifted the rifle, but waited. Anissa grabbed a metal bucket and struck it with a hammer repeatedly, creating a sharp, piercing clang that echoed across the frozen field. The wolves paused. One stepped forward deliberately, eyes fixed on the sheep enclosure. It was larger than the others. The leader, a silent standoff. Wind brushed lightly across the snow. Nothing like the blizzard, but enough to carry scent and sound. Lena fired a single shot into the ground between them. Snow exploded upward. The leader did not flinch immediately. Then slowly it stepped back. Another followed. Minutes stretched. Finally, the pack turned and disappeared into darkness once more. They were measuring risk. The women were proving it too high. The 5th morning broke clearer than any since the storm. The sky revealed pale blue beneath streaks of frost cloud. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the snow. It glinted off the reinforced fences, the packed snow walls, the blackened edges of fire pits. Lena exhaled deeply. They haven't come back since last night. Anissa stood straight despite the stiffness in her joints. They will move on soon. They're easier hunts. The sheep stirred peacefully. The weakened one inside the cabin had regained strength overnight. The land remained unforgiving. The temperature still deadly. The wolves still somewhere beyond the horizon. But something had shifted. The women had not merely survived the blizzard. They had established a boundary, not just of wood and fire, but of will. Anissa placed a gloved hand on the fence post. Winter isn't over, she said. Lena looked out across the endless white expanse. No, she replied, but neither are we. The sun rose higher, and the steppe, silent and vast, seemed to acknowledge their endurance. 3 days after the last confrontation, the wolves did not return. Tracks finally appeared at the edge of the horizon, not circling but moving away. They've shifted territory, Lena observed. For now, Anissa replied, but the feed was nearly gone. They prepared the sled at dawn. The path to the nearest village was barely visible beneath hardened drifts. The journey would take hours, maybe longer if the snow proved unstable. You stay with the flock, Anissa said. Lena stared at her. You can't make that trip alone. I've walked this land longer than you've been alive. And you're 80. Anissa's eyes sharpened. And still standing. In the end, they compromised. Lena would make the journey. Anissa would guard the flock and tend the fires. Before leaving, Lena embraced her mother tightly, a rare gesture in a place where affection was often silent. Keep the rifle close, Lena said. Anissa gave a faint nod. I always do. The silence felt heavier without Lena. Anissa moved carefully between the enclosure and the cabin, conserving strength. The sheep sensed the difference. They were calmer, quieter. Midday passed without incident. But near dusk, she saw movement. Not a pack, just one wolf. Thin, cautious, watching from a distance beyond rifle range. It did not approach. It did not howl. It simply stood observing. Anissa met its gaze. You lost, she murmured softly. The wolf tilted its head slightly, as if considering her. Then it turned and vanished over Snow Ridge. Anissa did not relax. Solitary wolves are unpredictable, but none returned that night. Darkness had fully fallen when Anissa heard the distant scrape of sled runners against hard snow. Her heart tightened. Then she saw it, a lantern swinging gently in the distance. Lena, she had made it. The sled was loaded with feed sacks, fuel, and a small crate of preserved food given by neighbors who had heard about the storm. You should have seen their faces when I told them the temperature, Lena said breathlessly. They thought we were exaggerating. Anissa allowed herself a rare chuckle. We don't exaggerate here. Together, they unloaded supplies under starlight. The sky was clear now, brutally beautiful, filled with cold, sharp stars. The worst had passed. For now. A week later, temperatures began to rise. Not warm, but less murderous. The fences stood strong. The sheep were fed and steady. One night, just as Lena finished banking the stove, a final howl drifted across the frozen steppe. Distant, fading, not a threat, a farewell. Anissa stepped outside and listened until the sound dissolved into silence. That one, she said quietly. The leader. You think so? Lena asked. Anissa nodded. They move on when the hunt costs too much. Lena looked toward the dark horizon. We made it cost too much. Spring was still months away. Winter would continue to test them in smaller, quieter ways. Broken tools, dwindling daylight, relentless cold. But the blizzard of minus 79 degrees Celsius had become a marker in time. A line between before and after. Mother and daughter stood together at the edge of the enclosure as pale sunlight stretched across the snow. The sheep grazed cautiously where wind had exposed dry patches beneath the frost. We are still here, Lena said softly. Anissa placed her hand over her daughter's gloved one. That is enough. The land remained vast and indifferent. The wolves still roamed somewhere beyond sight. The cold still ruled the steppe. But within that frozen expanse stood two women, a flock protected, and fences reinforced not only with wood and fire, but with resilience. And in a place where survival is never guaranteed, resilience is everything.